Bow our heads in prayer as we start. Heavenly Father, thank Thee for this time. We can continue the preview of the minor prophets as we look at the post-exilic prophets and the first of the three, Haggai. Oh Lord, may we listen to the heart call of this prophet for us to reorder our priorities and make You first in our lives so that we can find true pleasure and success, not in what we attain, but because of what You can do for us and through us. Give us teachable minds and give us wisdom. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so we'll cover a lot of grounds. I'll go through the handouts I gave you so you can understand the cultural context of where we are in the study of the minor prophets, and then towards the end we will go into the study of Haggai. Boyet, I'll see if I can put the things here. You might be able to project things. Take this out. It's here. The first thing we need to include is this. Do you have this? Okay, so that's the first handout. So this is, I called it a Jewish timeline, and for those following in YouTube, we will make this available to you. I think the file is called Jewish Timeline. Everything is in PDF format, so you can just download it in PDF. So if you don't have a copy, you guys here, you can download the copy from YouTube. Tim always puts a link there. You just click the link. It will take you to all the files that you can download, and it will take you to all the files that we've uploaded ever since we studied the minor prophets. You can click on it, and you can download it for your own keeping. Okay, so put it in your file. You don't even have to print it. You can see it in your computer, and you know, change the size. But I think it would be good. We will review this again. So hold on to this. If you're able, please take this back with you next week, because we will be studying the post-exilic prophets now. So let's review exactly the flow of the Jewish history. I was listening to Dr. Rydelnik this morning in WMBI. Dr. Rydelnik took the place of Pastor Cole, one of my highly respected Bible teacher in MBI, who everybody thought who had a computer while he was answering questions. He did not have a computer. All he had was a Bible. And he did it for over 30 years. It's amazing the wisdom of this guy from his knowledge of the scriptures. He was able to answer stuff. So it was very difficult to find a replacement for Pastor Cole. It was Dr. David Rydelnik who took his place. And he's got a Bible answer, question and answer every Saturday morning. So on my way to church, my radio is only to the MBI. I listen to their back and forth question and answer. Of course, we don't share their views on the last days the way we understand Revelation and Daniel. But he answered. One of the questions I was asked, because I think he's a Jew, is why in the world did God pick the Jewish nation? Why not the Chinese? Why not the European, you know? Why not an African?
Because the promised Messiah came from the Jewish.
Well, that's a question. Why did he promise the Messiah through the Jewish lineage? Why not to a Chinese lineage? Why not to an African? Why not to an Egyptian? Well, you read Deuteronomy 7, there was only one reason. It's by grace. They were not picked because they had something special. They were picked because God loved them, and through His grace.
No, they were chosen.
Yeah, they were chosen. And that choosing is not based on what they can present to God. It is purely based on grace. He was gracious enough to choose them. Okay? And that's the first lesson I think we need to hammer down while we study the Bible. You got to understand, if there is a human nationality that the Christ would have, the Lamb, what will be that nationality? Strictly speaking, that will be Jewish. We go to heaven, Jesus will be a Jewish. So away with the thought that Jesus will be an Ilocano or a Visayan or a Mexican, you know, or a Hispanic. No, Jesus is a Jew. But His Jewishness does not lessen our value as a Filipino or an American or an Asian for that matter. Because according to Him in the Gospels, In Christ there is no Jew or Greek, women or male, free or slaves. If you are in Jesus Christ, then you are Abraham's seed. True Israel is not the one of flesh. It is of the heart. So if you believe in Jesus, you become part of true Israel. Anyways, the reason why I say that is you have to understand the Bible through the Jewish nation. Remember, we opened this historical timeline immediately after the flood. Okay, we've covered the question of the Garden of Eden last quarter and how our first parents failed and there was a fall. And then after the fall men became very wicked again and God sent a deluge. Noah's flood was there, wiped out the nation. 8 people were left. They propagated and populated the earth again. And then after so many years, earth became very wicked again. And then God chose a man. His name was Abram from Ur. He said, I want you to leave Ur in the Chaldees, in the Chaldean country you're in, and move to a city, according to the writer to the Hebrews, whose builder and maker is God, not man. So you see Abraham leaving, okay? And as soon as Abraham leaves, now we find the Jewish nation under Egyptian bondage, right? Because we're under Egyptian bondage, God sent Moses and Joshua to liberate them from Egypt. Okay, you follow the timeline. The dates approximately are up on top. These are all BC, before Christ. Okay. Then after they were liberated from Egyptian bondage, they sojourned for 40 years in the wilderness to get into the promised land. The Jewish nation survived after they subdivided the land to all the 12 tribes. They survived with the leadership of judges, right? You follow? They followed after the judges led the children of Israel. The children of Israel, like people like us today, looks around them and wants to be like the world. They said, we don't want to just be a theocracy, just God led by God whom we cannot see. We want to have our own king, right? Remember that story? Because they picked a king. And who were the kings of Israel? The United Kingdom was Saul, David, and Solomon. So you have the United Kingdom. And then you know what happened with Solomon, right? Solomon was the wisest, probably the richest kings of all. Except for Solomon, wasted his life, married a lot of women who were not part of the Jewish belief and tradition, brought in a lot of idols. And remember the 3 books of Solomon? What are the 3 books of Solomon? Supposedly Solomon wrote the Song of Solomon's the Song of Songs when he was a teenager, very passionately in love. You know, that's a book on love and romance. And then he became wiser, became older and wiser. He wrote the book of Proverbs. There's a lot of ideas. If you follow Proverbs, we gave a Bible study to someone who liked the Proverbs, read the Proverbs every day as a guide to his business and a guide to his life. There's a ton of guidance you can get from Proverbs. And then he wrote the 3rd book, which is called The Preacher, towards the end of his life, when he was about to die. Book of Ecclesiastes, and let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man. For he will have everything come into judgment one of these days. So regardless of what has happened, as illustrious as his kingdom was, Solomon dragged the entire nation into decadence and idolatry. And because of that, the kingdom was divided. Okay? What were the divisions of the kingdom? It was not the division of east and west. The division was northern and southern kingdom. You got 10 tribes in the north, 2 tribes in the south. You see that here. And the same story, you know, the story of God telling the people what to do, the people disobeying and rebelling, and after they rebel, God judges them, and then God disciplines them, they repent and come back, and all again, cycle goes through and through. Same cycle through our lives. You notice that when you follow God in your life, somehow things are well. The moment you stray away from His will, you do damage to yourself, right? And that's what's going on. Unfortunately, in terms of the northern kingdom, they did enough damage. God said, that's it. And for the past several Sabbaths, we're talking about the judgment of the northern kingdom. Because the northern kingdom fell under Assyria, 722. It fell before the southern kingdom fell. Okay? And then the southern kingdom fell. Judah fell under what reign? Babylonian captivity. And the Babylonian captivity was in about 586. Okay? And then since they were taken captives into Babylon, this is what we call now a Babylonian exile. Okay? This is very pivotal in our understanding. It's called Babylonian exile, so that when we look at the prophets, we can call them pre-exilic and post-exilic prophets. What's the meaning of that? Pre-exilic means prophets before the exile. Post-exilic means prophets after the exile. In fact, there are exilic prophets because there were prophets during the exile. Namely, Daniel and Ezekiel were in Babylon. Daniel was in the palace. Ezekiel was in the river Ulai. Okay? So while Ezekiel was ministering to the people, to the Jews, Daniel was up there in the echelons of the rulers of Babylon leading out. But both prophets were there. We get an exilic prophet, we got pre-exilic, and we got post-exilic. We just studied Zephaniah today. He is a pre-exilic prophet. Because, remember, all of these are pre-exilic, but there are two exiles. Oh no, there's only one exile. Because when the northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians, they were not taken to exiles. They just basically plundered the whole northern kingdom. That's why you came up with Samaritans today. What are Samaritans?
Because you're dogs, because they were a result of conception between the Jewish
Yes.
women and the Assyrians.
Yes, they're half-breeds. And because they're half-breeds, and I always say this, and I never understood this until I spoke to a Mexican friend, that's why some Mexicans hate a lot of Puerto Ricans. They probably have the same background. The reason why they hate it, not because of the way they look. The reason is that Puerto Rico kind of sold its national soul to the United States. It's almost like some people in the Philippines who wants to have the Philippines as a state of the United States. Can you imagine if the Philippines becomes a state? A lot of people who came from our national heroes, who died during the war, will not like that. I'd much rather be poor and have my independence as a Filipino than be rich and of goods and sell my national soul. Anyway, that's not for discussion. All I'm saying, the northern kingdom became a breeding ground of half-baked Jews. You got some Syrians, some Gentiles, some Assyrians, and some Jews. That's why to Jesus' day, they hated each other. They hated the Gentiles and the Jews hated each other, but they hated the Samaritans a lot. The reason why they hated them are because they were half-breed. And it's amazing when Jesus tells stories, he tells stories about Samaritans, right? Because what was Jesus trying to do? He was trying to do racial reconciliation. Okay, that's what he was trying to do. Anyway, so there was only one exile. The only exile is actually the Babylonian exile. And we got prophets prior to the exile, and we got prophets after the exile. What we will study today will be the first of the three prophets, the post-exilic prophets. We got Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Those are the three post-exilic prophets. And they were the ones responsible in rebuilding the temple of Jerusalem and rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. The restoration of Jerusalem was under the care of these three post-exilic prophets. Who are they again? Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Okay, so where do we pick it up? We pick it up from here. We pick it up right here when Jerusalem was restored. Okay? Where is the other? I thought I had the. So Boyd saw that. There was another. Oh, yeah. Did I show the other one there, Boyd? So I'm like, they can download this, okay? This is the first one that gives you a bird's eye view of Jewish timeline. This is the other, where was the other one? Which was the 70-year prophecy of Jeremiah. Oh, right here, sorry. So you see this? Everybody see this? Yeah, Nida has it. So you just share with Ernie right now. Okay. Maybe if you promise you'll be early in the next sessions, we'll give you an extra copy because husband and wife share right now. So if you see this is where Daniel, the Battle of Carchemish, was there. Daniel and the three Hebrews were taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar. And you see Jeremiah 25:11. That was the 70-year prophecy of captivity according to God through Jeremiah. You will be taken captives because you have been unfaithful to me. You're guilty of idolatry, guilty of injustice. For 70 years, you'll be taken as exiles. Where? In Babylon. Okay? So there's a 70-year exile. That started about 606. That went all the way to 536 because you know what happened, right? Babylon fell to the Medo-Persians, to the Medes and the Persians. And because the Medes and Persians took over, it was Cyrus that God chose to allow the Jews to go back and restore Jerusalem and the temple. Yeah, you see the entire sweep of history. Where do we come in the study of Haggai? The study of Haggai is right about the time when the Jews were going back to rebuild the temple. Okay? That's why it's called post-exilic. It's after the exile, not prior to the exile.
Existence of the southern kingdom.
Oh, was that 722? Yeah, that's when Assyria took over the northern kingdom. And in your study this morning, for some reason, that's the way they slided the book of Nahum, right? Nahum went into the picture even if you're studying Zephaniah. Remember our study? So you don't miss this. There's only 12 minor prophets. So you'll have an idea what those prophets are about. If Jonah was about the salvation of Nineveh, Nahum is about what? Nahum is about the destruction of Nineveh. As great as Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, as great as Syria was, they plundered the northern kingdom as an instrument of God's justice. Even the prophet said, even Assyria and Nineveh will go down and God will judge them. Okay, and that happened in 606 when Nabopolassar plundered the Assyrian empire. Okay, and remember, Assyria took over the north and Babylon took the southern kingdom as captives. Okay, next week, if you show up, I will give you more timelines. I'll give you the timelines of each Persian kings and what actually happened to the temples, okay? And then I will somehow give you the timeline of Alexander the Great, so you'll understand after Alexander the Great, the Romans took over. Remember, when Jesus was born into this world, who was the reigning world empire? It was the Roman Empire, okay? Okay, so if you remember the image that's why it's so neat. After the 70-year captivity, you now go to Daniel. Daniel gives you an entire sweep of what happens, except for Daniel starts with Babylon. The study of the minor prophets starts with Assyria, okay? And before that, starts with Egypt. In fact, if you remember your Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd, Kings, Samuel, Chronicles, and then Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Why do we say Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther? These are historical books. Ezra and Nehemiah were responsible in leading the people to restore Jerusalem. Why was Esther into the picture? Because Esther was a queen in the Persian Empire. And I'll give you that timeline again next week so you'll better understand. So it's not because you memorized the books of the Bible, they're in the right chronological sequence, okay? But you got to understand the historical context. In fact, it's only the Gospels. There's the sequential Gospel. They tell you the story based on the timeline. Hopefully we can get something in the Old Testament to do that too. So we start with the fact that Persia sent 50,000 Jews back to Jerusalem. Why were they sent? So that they can rebuild their country. Question. What was the first thing the Jews did? Well, what was the first thing they did in the process of rebuilding? What did they rebuild first?
The walls.
No, walls came. If you will find out next week, it was the last to be. Yeah, you would think like the walls of China and any nation. Let me build a fortress so I can defend and protect my nation. That was the thinking of the common nation. But for the Israelites, for the Jews, what was the first thing they need to build? They needed to build a temple. You got to understand this. This is very important, a very important lesson. We studied this in Zephaniah. We were reading this morning that everything will be swept away. Nothing will be left. That doesn't mean that there were things left. Otherwise, the Babylonians would have not come for the kingdom of Judah. What Zephaniah was saying was, the moment God's presence leaves you, everything is gone. The verse in Proverbs 29 that says, without vision the people perish. Have you heard this? And this verse has been taken by so many corporations to be the biblical basis of their mission statement. You know, you must have a vision. You must have a mission statement. But that's a misinterpretation of Proverbs 29. What Proverbs is saying, without the word of God, without the prophetic word, the people will have no guidance. And if they will have no guidance, they will go astray and they will destroy themselves. That's what it's saying. So basically, what it's saying, without the prophetic word, a nation will die. Why do we have a prophetic word? Because God wants to communicate with his people. Where does he communicate? To the prophets. But in terms of an edifice, what was the symbol of God's presence in the land? It was the temple. And because it was the temple, everything was wiped out. For the Jew, the last edifice that's going to be destroyed by the enemy will be what? They can destroy the palace. They can destroy any other city. But the last thing they can touch is the temple. Because anybody who touches the ark dies, right? From the story of the Philistines, all of that stuff. Well, when the Babylonians came, they ransacked the temple, leveled the temple down. And in fact, the only thing that they saved were the golden vessels that they plundered to take to Babylon. But they destroyed the temple altogether. That's why that's what the prophet meant. Everything will be wiped out. What does he mean? Because you were not faithful to God, even the presence of God will leave you. And the moment the presence of God leaves you, everything's gone from you. That's another lesson I like to bring out. I don't care how successful you are. If in your success, the presence of God is not there, it will be meaningless. And you'll see that in a little while.
Could you apply that to the church?
Oh, sure. In fact, in the first part there, we'll talk about this. You can do as much as you want without God. How does Psalm say it? Unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I don't care if you got all the ammos, you got all the resources that you need. If the Spirit of God is not there, it's just not there. I'll take it close to home. Have you been to a very big church who's got all the sound system and the lights that they need, you know, and all the high-tech equipment, and not feel the presence of God? But you felt the presence of the performance on stage. You know, where worship was really clapping for those who were singing and performing rather than approaching the throne of God. That has happened to me. And you know what I tell myself? What a sham. Look at all this high-tech equipment in a supposedly house of God. And the presence of God is not there. Can that be true in an institution? Yes, it can. Can it be true in a local church? It can be true anywhere. Can it be true in my life? I think that's the most important question to ask. Yes. Because you can do all your ambitions and try to achieve them without God leading you. It will be useless.
Could you put that in as Satan took his seat in the temple?
Yeah, metaphorically, you can use that statement in Revelation, that the throne of Satan, the seat of Satan. Yeah, except for, remember, God will not allow his people to be totally wiped out. Because if he allows his people to be totally wiped out, in the context of the minor prophets, the Messiah cannot be born. That's why we come into a concept which is very important, okay? You already talked about this. He always has a remnant. Who were the remnant? It was Daniel and his friends, right? The Jews who went to Babylon. There was a remnant of the Jews. Not everybody went back to rebuild Jerusalem, okay? But what happened? The Jews who went back to Jerusalem, they were the remnant. And we will talk about that. We'll talk about Zerubbabel in the end. They became the ancestors of Jesus until he was born. Yeah, you got to understand, we're studying all this history, but what's the culmination of history? It's the birth of the coming Messiah. That's what the study of the minor prophets is all about. You miss that, you miss the whole point of the story. The story is not about Zephaniah and Haggai and Malachi. The story is about the coming Messiah. And they're looking forward to the day of the Lord when the Messiah comes and restores the glory of the temple. What's the meaning of restoring the glory of the temple? It means restoring the glory of the presence of God. That's why in the end we will talk about that. Jesus is saying, there is somebody greater than the temple here. Remember what Jesus said? If you think the temple is great, there is somebody greater than the temple here. And who is that? That's Jesus Christ. Why did he say that? We will come back to this in a little while. Because the temple really is the presence of God. That's why when you go to Revelation 21:22, you read Revelation, in the new earth, in the new heavens, he said, and I saw no temple there, because the Father and the Lamb were its temple. What was Revelation trying to say? What was God saying to John? John is basically saying the reason why you had the temple in the first place was to have the presence of God. Now that God is with you, you don't need a temple anymore, because the presence of God is with you face to face. That's really amazing. And that's what we're trying to say. Okay, so in that context, let's go into Haggai. Haggai is a series of 3 sermons. Just 2 chapters. Okay? It's very concise. It's almost as brief as Habakkuk. But Haggai preached only 4 sermons, and let me give you the dates so you'll have an idea how they're spread apart. This was written in September. I think that was 9. In fact, they have if you go back to the stuff, there is here you go. This is September 21. This is October 17. And this is December 18. Period of 4 months, a ministry of 4 months. Haggai just preached his messages in 4 months, from September to December. And we will take a look at what the Haggai told the people. We'll break it apart. We will address some of the questions that has been raised already. A good outline that I saw is saying the sermon was pointed to the hands of the people first, so that they can perform their God-given assignment. The second sermon pointed to the heart, to make the people patient. Because you know what happened, right? They look at the temple that they rebuilt. It was in no way close to Solomon's temple. And then thirdly, it was a sermon to the head. You say, remember, Zerubbabel is going to come. And Zerubbabel, who is Zerubbabel, by the way? Who was Joshua? Joshua was the high priest. Okay? So you got the post-exilic prophets in Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, who were the 2 major prophets the 2 major historical books. Ezra and Nehemiah was there. But who was the governor and who was the high priest? The governmental leader was Zerubbabel. The leader of the temple was Joshua. He was the high priest. Zerubbabel and Joshua, they helped rebuild the temple, while they were encouraged and motivated by Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So you look at the picture that way. So to the head, he talks about Zerubbabel becoming the progenitor of the coming Messiah. So we will break this down, and if you have your Bibles, I'll have you read some of the text right here. Somebody read the verses, Chapter 1, verses 1 and 2.
Second year of King David's 6th month, on the first day of the month, the word Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, saying, Thus speaks the Lord of hosts, saying, This people says the time has not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built.
Okay, what does verse 2 tell you? Okay, what were the people doing here? They were in the process of rebuilding the temple. Okay, there you go. But they said, the time has not yet come. There's a reason why the time has not yet come. Oh yeah, exactly. That's what Benji is saying. We don't have enough resources.
No money.
No money. We cannot complete the temple. Okay, you can understand the background, okay? And then somebody go to verse 8. Chapter 1, verse 8. 1 verse 8.
Go up to the mountains and bring wood and build the temple, that I may take pleasure in it and be glorified, says the Lord.
Okay, what's God's advice? I know your economic situation right now, but go up. Go up. What does it mean go up to the mountain? Yeah, got up the terms. He basically just is saying, when you go up the mountain, you go to the temple. It's time for you to worship me in my house. So you build my house. That's what God is trying to say. What was wrong? Somebody read, this is important, verse 4. This is one of the key texts in the book.
Is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses, and this temple to lie in ruins?
Did you hear that? What was happening? Oh God, the temple is, the economy is bad. While they were sitting in palaces. Oh, we don't have no money. Business is not really thriving. We can get by. Forget your temple. Let me take care of my house. that's the first situation we encounter here. That's the reason why Haggai was sent. Haggai was sent to tell them, guys, you know, you have big problems. The reason why you're not succeeding, you don't make God first. You make your houses first. I remember Mott telling me one day, oh, we got problems in this church. We don't have enough money. And then Mott says, why don't you go out of church one Sabbath morning and check all the cars parked in the parking lot? What kind of cars do we drive? And we don't have money? Yeah, he's like, it's almost like Haggai coming here, right? You know, that's a good thing. A lot of people are very generous and they give to the cause of the church. But it's almost like we're building a church here. And then you got all these luxury cars parked and say, oh, we don't have money. We got to build a temple. And Haggai was saying, how dare you have those cars and those houses and you don't build my temple? That's what he's trying to say here. Man, this will hit a lot of, he'll step a lot on toes when you study this lesson this coming Sabbath, especially in America. Oh, give me a break. You just say, whoa, how can I give to God? I'm barely surviving with my job. Has it ever occurred to you the reason why you're barely surviving your job is because you don't make God first? God's math is different from men's math. Men's math says 10 minus 1. Forget that 10 minus 1. Let's make it 100 minus 10 is 90. I need a 10. Okay, the 10. I only have 100. I can barely survive with that. You get the 10. That's your math. But when you do God's math and you say 100 minus 10, that becomes 1,000, if not 10,000. Because the more you give to God, the more He gives back. How does Dr. Jeremiah put it? Says, this is the way I look at it. I shovel my resources out, and God shovels it back in. And before I know it, I learned that God's shovel is bigger than mine. So you know what happens? Every time you shovel something out for His cause, He gives it back. A lot more than what you shoveled out. I don't want to repeat all the illustrations I gave you. There's countless testimonies within the church who have been faithful in giving to God in their stewardship, and how the Lord has blessed them. And there are people who have been stingy in church. You know, you want to like save on money, you gotta be a miser, and you're doing stuff, and before you know it, you have a car breaking down. You have something in the house breaking down. All of a sudden, there's extra expenses. And then whereas you get some people whose car is breaking down, but they didn't care. They didn't have the car repaired first. They gave their tithe first. And all of a sudden, a new car comes up, given to them. That's the way the economy of God works. That was the challenge of Haggai. Perform. When you perform, do not perform for yourselves. Perform for me. When you say perform for me, every Sabbath when you go to church and we worship, who's the audience? All right, Clea knows that. People miss this. They thought the congregation is the audience. No. When you go to church and in the context of worship, the audience is God. We are the performers. Why do we perform? We do not perform to satisfy ourselves. We perform to please God. That's why Max Lucado, I think, wrote a book entitled The Applause of God. How many of you have been to a recital, you know, when you studied piano or something? You know, I remember when I was still a kid, when my mom had to force me to take piano lessons, and finally there's a recital. And when you play in the recital, you really don't care so much about the applause of everybody else except for the applause of your teacher, right? Because if your teacher applauds you, that's something else. Because you really didn't perform for everybody. You were performing for your teacher. The same thing is true with worship. You do not perform for each other. You perform for God. How does our favorite verse go? Psalms 37, verse 4. Delight yourself therefore in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. The only way you can find true desires is to delight in God. How do you delight in God? By finding pleasures in God. I forgot who preached this. What, is Chuck Swindoll or somebody else? But I was unable to jot it down because I was driving the car. Basically what he said, it is true that when you accept Jesus Christ, you become a child of God. Isn't it true? All of us are children of God. Question, do all children please their fathers and their mothers? Is it possible that within the people of God there are children of God, but not all the children of God perform to please their Father? That's the call of Haggai. You're my people, you're my children, perform. Make my presence your priority. Okay, I'm not talking about building a temple here. I don't think that's the application. The application of Haggai is make the presence of God the priority in your life. What does that mean? Do not make any decisions without being certain that the presence of God is in you, in directing the decision. Don't make any plans. Don't make any purchases. You know, don't do anything in your life without going to God first. Make sure that God is in it. Have you heard the expression, you know, the board has been meeting and they were deciding for quite a long time, and one of the board members asked, is God in this? You know, have you heard the question? You know what the meaning of is God in this? That means, hey, are we sure that God wants us to do this? In fact, one pastor is saying, don't even try to attempt the first move until you're certain that the answer is yes. That's what he's trying to say. And that can be very difficult. I'm not saying hard in terms of giving yourself a hard time, because it will still be a delight for you even if it's difficult, right? To do things for God. You do things difficult for your family, but it's your delight because you love your family. You do that to your family. But what he's trying to say is, try to pursue. You know what the meaning of pursue is? When you pursue a gold medal in the Olympics, what does that mean? What does that entail?
That is your priority. That's
Yes.
why in the time of Haggai, he is trying to remind those people what their priority is. Because one of the greatest mistakes a person can do is their plan God is not in there. He must be included, otherwise your plan is no good.
Sure. So the question is, I'll repeat the question that we always say, is God in this? If God is not in this, don't even attempt to do it because you'll have some problems. What's the name of the gold medalist in gymnastics? You know who I'm talking about, right? The girl who did the full split in Time magazine. What's her name again? Yeah. Gabby. Yeah, Gabby. Thanks, Ernie. You know what Gabby had to skip in order to win that gold medal? She skipped her childhood. While everybody's playing in the playground, she was in the gym hours and hours every day preparing for that one moment to win the gold medal. That's pursuit. You know, I always hear this. You do that, but you waste your social life. Haggai is asking you, what made you think that your social life is more important than your life with God? I'm not saying don't have a social life. Don't misunderstand me. But the moment your social life takes precedence over your life with God, there is something wrong. That's what Haggai is trying to say. Did Haggai say it's wrong to have paneled houses? No. But it's wrong to have a paneled house while the temple of God is crumbling. What is he trying to say? It's wrong for you to achieve things when in fact your relationship with God is in shambles. Make God a priority. That's what Haggai is trying to say. And to build the temple means to build the presence of God. Let me just apply it one more time and we'll go to the next part. How do you build the presence of God in your life? Yes. You start with prayer. You start the day with your bended knees. You start the day with that Bible open. You start the day telling God, I cannot make it without you. Lord, it is only by your grace that I am even here. That's building the temple. And then you're married to your job that gives you a lot of money and gives you here in America. God said life is not about that. Life is about you and I communing with each other and you sensing my presence. That's what Haggai is trying to say. When you perform, pursue God. Okay? Pursue God. Perform. You know, in fact, if I may be more direct, I'll probably change the perform to pursue God. If your pursuit is centered on God, everything will be added to you. Okay, go to your next handout. But the temple timeline, do you see that? Let's see. I think I have that here. Where's the temple timeline here? We ran out here, Benji. Yeah, I got it. Here, boy, it's just way up the top. Everybody has a temple timeline? There are several temples in Jewish history. There's a tabernacle starting in Exodus 25:8. What did God say? Let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. That is a portable sanctuary, a portable tent. And they moved that temple everywhere they went. For 40 years it was moving. What was at the center of the temple? What was at the center of the sanctuary? The most holy place. And you will know where the encampment of the children of Israel, if from afar you can see a pillar of cloud or a pillar of fire, right? Remember that pillar of cloud, they say it was just a cloud. No, that is a glowing cloud. You know, if you read the background, even if it's a cloud during the day, it was glorious. There was a glow in the cloud. And it started glowing more brightly at night because it's dark. Where is that pillar of cloud and pillar of fire sitting? Sitting on top of the most holy place, the Shekinah glory, which is the presence of God. That's the first temple. Okay? And then when they finally settled into the promised land, David wanted to build a temple. And God said, you cannot build a temple because your hands are full of blood. You've killed a lot of people. I will let your son build a temple for me. And the grandest temple that was ever built for God was the temple during the time of King Solomon. That's why it's called Solomon's Temple. Why is it grand? Because almost everything was inlaid with gold. And remember the story in Chronicles and Kings? You did not hear the sound of a hammer or a chisel because everything was prefabricated and fitted before they were taken on the mountain. It's amazing. It was almost like a Lego. Huh? You just get all those Lego, put them together. But it's, you think the marvels of engineering today, just think of what they did years and years before Jesus was born. There were engineers who were skilled at the craftsmen there to build the temple, were so great. They didn't even use a hammer. Before they went up and built the Temple of Solomon, they built the thing, and it's one of the wonders of the ancient world. So every time the children of Israel thinks about the temple, they think about the Temple of Solomon. But what happened to the temple? It's destroyed by the enemies. All right, so here comes the people from Babylon, and Haggai motivating them. They built the temple. And as soon as they built the temple, it was called Zerubbabel's temple. Why is it called Zerubbabel's temple? Because the governor was Zerubbabel then. The temple that was restored was the temple under the governorship of Zerubbabel. That's why from Solomon's temple, you have Zerubbabel's temple. Compared to Solomon's temple, how did Zerubbabel's temple stand? And he goes to chapter 2. Somebody read verse 9.
Glory of this latter temple shall be greater than the former, says the Lord of hosts. And in this place I will give peace, says the Lord of hosts.
All right. Don't forget verse 9. Okay. I want you to go back. There's a contrast. I think that's verse 3. Somebody read verse 3.
Who is left among you who saw this temple in its former glory? And how do you see it now? In comparison with it, is this not in your eyes as nothing?
Wow. Okay. Look at how this is the perception of the people. They are building a temple, and they look at the temple, they compared it to the temple of Solomon, right? How does it compare? What is the description? I mean, nagpagal ka. Sabi, you did everything you can. And all you did compared to what you had before is nothing. So people were discouraged. Wow, 50,000 strong of us came from Babylon to build this. And all that we can afford is nothing compared to the old temple. They were discouraged. That's why what's the next sermon? Be patient. Why should you be patient? Because of verse 9. What does verse 9 say? The glory of this latter temple shall be greater than the former, says the Lord of hosts. Why will the glory of the temple be greater than the temple of Solomon? I already quoted you what Jesus said. Jesus said there is someone greater than the temple here. It is interesting to note that when you go to John 1, and John 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. Nothing was made that was ever made except through Him. And then you jump to verse 14, and the Word was made flesh, and the literal translation is, and tabernacled among us. And the Word was made flesh and templed among us. Are you following? Who is the tabernacle and who is the temple? It is the Word of God who is Jesus Christ, because we've started that the temple is not an edifice, the temple is the presence of God. And John is saying, now God has come in human form. The temple is with you. And this temple is greater than the glory of the temple of Solomon, because it is God Himself. Some people did not see that, but people who believe in Jesus Christ saw the far-reaching glory of Jesus Christ and the temple of Solomon. That's why it says, be patient. It is coming. The Messiah will come, and the Messiah will be the temple greater than the temple of Solomon. Okay? Ashley, there's a sermon to the head. Get to the other handout I gave you. I hope I find it here. Okay, Batan. It's the genealogy of Jesus. Ponder is think, okay? Just you know why I did it P, right? Because so you had all three P's. P is what? Perform or pursue God. You be patient and ponder. So it's easy for you to remember. If you forget your notes, you teach your class. You remember that, huh? Perform, be patient, and ponder. All three P's in your head. Pursue God is the first part. And then look at the handouts I gave you. There are two genealogies of Jesus Christ. One genealogy is given by Matthew, and the other genealogy is given by Luke. Oh, by the way, one of the challenges I always have when I do a seminar among pastors, a preaching seminar, is to preach a sermon in Matthew 1. How does Matthew 1 read? Begat. Okay, it's the father of this, father of that. How in the world can you preach a sermon from that? And some, at least Bishop Ryle was very insightful enough to come up with the sermon. Of all the ancestors of Jesus in Matthew, there were only 4 women there. And those 4 women were either evil women, sinful women, or Gentiles. You got Bathsheba there, you got Tamar, you got Rahab, and you got Ruth. Ruth was a Gentile. Bathsheba was an adulteress. Rahab and Tamar acted like prostitutes. Why in the world did God planted 4 females deliberately within the genealogy? Jews do not use females in the genealogies, but they use 4 females in the genealogy to prove how gracious He is. That even in the lineage of prostitutes and sinful people, the Messiah still came. All right? Now you go to Luke, and people ask the question, how in the world is different in Luke? The genealogies Luke. Here's the answer, and the answer is right there in front of you in the handout. Whereas the Gospel of Matthew lists the genealogy from Abraham to Jesus, the Gospel of Luke lists the genealogy of Jesus back to Adam. Okay? So Matthew was very Jewish, okay, from an Israelite perspective. Luke was, remember, what was the nationality of Luke? He was not a Jew. He was a Greek, okay? He was a Gentile. So he always addressed, whenever he writes, Luke was the most Gentile in perspective. He also wrote the book of Acts, remember, right? So Luke basically talked to the Gentiles most of the time. So when he gave the genealogy of Jesus, he did not just go back to Abraham. He went back all the way to Adam. Okay, you see the intersection of Abraham and right there. But there's something very interesting. Go to the middle of the page. Zerubbabel shows up there. Zerubbabel shows up there. Why does Zerubbabel show up there? Because Zerubbabel was the governor when the temple was restored in Jerusalem. That's why it's called the Temple of Zerubbabel. And to finish the timeline, after Zerubbabel's temple was desecrated by Antiochus Epiphanes, if you studied Daniel and Revelation, during the Maccabean revolt, the temple was again restored by Herod the Great. And during the time of Jesus, the temple was the temple of Herod. They did the Passover in the temple of Herod. Jesus went to the temple. There was a temple of Herod. Jesus talked with the scribes and the priests in the temple. Jesus cleansed the temple as a temple of Herod. Okay. By the way, as an aside, let me just put this in. Where did the synagogues originate? Remember, if you ask, what was Paul's evangelistic MO? What was his approach? Every time he goes to a place, where does he go first? He goes to the synagogue on the Sabbath, right? And reasoned with people in the scriptures. Everywhere he went, unless he wasn't welcome, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath. Where do we find the first synagogue? The synagogue is not the temple. Okay, there were synagogues in Jerusalem, but you know where the synagogues originated? Just an aside, the synagogues originated in Babylon. Here's the problem. You were a Jew, and all your life, you've been worshiping in the temple. All the feasts were in the temple. And you wake up one morning, your temple has been leveled to the ground by the Babylonians. So you have no temple to worship. And the Jew cannot exist without worshiping. So you know what they did? They started the concept of a synagogue. Synagogue is a gathering of people where they can study the Torah, study the Old Testament books, and they can pray and worship together without the temple. The synagogue became the model of the church that we have today. It's not a model of the temple. We don't have a holy place, most holy place. Some churches do. And we don't have a most holy place, most holy place in the church. But this is a model of the synagogue based on what Jesus says. Remember what Jesus said? Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. It doesn't really matter, how many you are. As long as you're gathered in my name, I will be there. And what they did said, why don't we designate the place where we can read from the books? They have some commentary, and then we can pray together. So it is in Luke 4. Jesus goes into the synagogue, as his custom was, like every Sabbath, and he was asked to read from Isaiah. Remember? The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the good news to the poor, to bring freedom to the captives, seeing to the blind, He said this, and then his commentary was, today the scriptures has been fulfilled in your very eyes. Where did he do it? He did it not in the temple, he did it in the synagogue. Because very slowly, Jesus was trying to inculcate in the minds of the people that the presence of God is not an institution. The presence of God is not the building. The presence of God is in him. Okay? So where does Zerubbabel come into play? There was another handout that they gave you. I do not favor the outline. This came from Rose Publishing. The other was from Nelson. The temple and Zerubbabel foreshadowed the future ministry of the coming Messiah. So somebody just read Haggai 2, 6 and 7. Verses 6 and 7.
The Lord of hosts, once more it is a little while, I will shake heaven and earth, the sea and dry land, and I will shake all nations, and they shall come to the desire of all nations, and I will fill this temple with glory, says the Lord of hosts.
Wow. What did Jesus say? What did God say? God basically was saying, you're looking at the temple that you're building as if it was nothing compared to the temple of Solomon. I'm telling you, one day will come. What will God do one day? What does it say? Okay, after shaking, what will he do? What will he do to the temple? He will fill the temple with his glory. And when God fills the temple with his glory, nothing can be more glorious than a temple filled with God's glory, compared to even a golden temple that Solomon built. Do you follow that? Because really, in the end, it is not how majestic the place is, as much as how real the presence of God is. And that's the sermon. Ponder. You say, there's just another point I'd like to make. Somebody read 2 verse 12.
Each one carries only holy meat in the fold of his garment, and with the edge of he touches bread or stew, wine or oil, or any food. Will it become holy?
Okay, Haggai was basically saying, you go to the temple and somehow you touch one of the offerings, which are now holy unto God because they've been consecrated to God. Does that mean because you touch that offering and you end up touching your kid or your neighbor or touch another person, does that make that person holy? You read the passage. That's the question he's trying to say. What is the implied answer? No. Because you are not made holy by the offerings. Only God can make you holy. And yet, the reverse is more sobering. If you defile yourself with idolatry, and you introduce idols to your family, will that make your family idolaters too? Yes. You know, very good principle here. What does it take to mess up a clean sheet of paper? A single dot. Right? What does it take to mess up an entire bowl of soup? You are easy. You can easily destroy what has been built for years. But to build something for God, it will take a longer time. In fact, you cannot build it for God. God will have to build it for you. This is what he's trying to say. You go to the temple and think yourself holy because you're part of them. You dress up like your goody two-shoes, like this Pharisee who goes to the temple one day, says, "Oh Lord, I'm so thankful. I'm not like that publican over there. I give my tithe. I help the poor. I give my alms. I do all this. Not that dirty, rotten sinner over there who does evil in your sight every day." Then what did the publican say? God, he can't even look at the heavens. He was bowing and beat on his breast. And then God said, "Be merciful to me, a sinner." And what did Jesus say? Who went home justified? I tell you, it was the publican who went home justified. What am I trying to say? When Haggai is saying, ponder, how do you worship in the temple? You don't worship by trying to be good and clean yourself up and trying to be holy, because you cannot be holy. You are defiled. Who told the story this morning? The children's story? Okay, Lita did. And this baby falls. Did you read the story about this Chinese baby who was left in the sewer? In the septic tank, you know. Can you imagine dropping something in the septic tank? You know, think of you using your cell phone. You're very careless, and your cell phone drops into the toilet bowl. That hasn't been flushed, you know. You know, how in the world can you think that you're clean? What if while you were in a hurry, you were in the toilet, and somehow you smeared your dress, your clothes, your church clothes, with the excrement and what have you, and you go to church with that? Okay, so Benji's doing like this, and you sit down by Benji, who took a shower, dressed really neat, dressed up, and did this thing, and then somebody sits by Benji and then touch him and contaminates it with some of the excrements that you have. What has happened to Benji? He starts smelling like you. You know, what is Haggai trying to say? All of you stink. There is no one righteous. Only God is righteous. So what is your prayer? Your prayer is not, "Lord, help me to be holy," because you cannot be holy. What is your prayer? The prayer of the publican. "Lord, have mercy and forgive me and cleanse me." That's what Haggai is trying to say. You want to go up to the mountain of God and worship Him? The way you worship Him is to ask for His grace and His mercy. You don't do it by trying to be holy, because you can't. You cannot manufacture holiness. It's a gift from God that you need to ask from Him. And then, obviously, we read about Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is the symbol of what Christ will be in the end. And because Zerubbabel was the governor and became a symbol of Jesus, who becomes a ruler, then someone greater than the temple will come. If you submit yourself to God, says Haggai, God will be merciful on you. And I'm telling you, even the temple that you build right now, that you consider nothing compared to Solomon's temple, you will find my glory greater than this temple. And I'm telling you, you will be in Jesus Christ, and I will give you the holiness that you will have. You see the promise of God? I will give glory to my presence. I will make my presence real. At the same token, I will enable you to worship me when you're before me. This is a twofold promise. The first promise is I will allow you to restore the presence of God before you. And the moment you're in the presence of God, you see, Pastor demonstrated this. What country does this? What country does this? All the sign of respect, all the sign of worship, you can respect that. What do you do in the presence of royalty? Okay, in America, you don't, that's a problem. We lack of respect for authority in America. Here's the problem. You go to England. I'm not talking about going to the Prime Minister of England. I'm talking about seeing the Queen and the Prince. And you go to the Buckingham Palace and you see the Queen. You just say, hey, yo! You do that in America. You don't do it. In fact, did you remember that? I still have the slide. I got to dig it up. This is one of my files. When Michelle Obama went to Buckingham Palace, she put her hand in the back of Queen Elizabeth, which is a no-no. You cannot do that based on court ethics. You cannot be that casual. You got to maintain the distance from royalty. But the Americans, oh no, hey yo, high five, That's how terrible Americans are. And you wonder why Americans cannot worship. They don't know how to respect. They can badmouth anybody from the president to the governor to the mayor and think they're the best of everybody. And then you ask them to worship. How in the world can they worship? They don't even know how to humble themselves before authority. Sir Francis Chan is always saying, I'm at an advantage because I came from an Asian culture. In an Asian culture, we are taught to respect our elders. And because I knew from my childhood how to respect, it's a lot easier to reverence God because I know what respect is all about. But in a country where you can badmouth your own parents and badmouth the president and badmouth everybody else, it is very difficult to know how to worship. But that's the bottom line. In the presence of God, if you know that God is, you will kneel down and worship Him. You will bow with your knee and worship Him. So there's the two promises to ponder. It said, you are filthy, but God allows you to be holy before Him. How does He do that? He will fulfill His promise by filling the temple with His glory. And once you see the presence of God, then He will enable you to worship Him. Let me repeat this. You can never truly worship God until you have sensed His presence. You follow me? Oh, you can fake it and sing in church. You can even kneel down. But can you kneel without the presence of God? Sure, you can kneel down and think about your stocks, right? Think about your work and think about, what will my duty tonight be? Oh, will I be working again all night? You think about the weather. Oh my, what will be the score in the Cubs and the Sox game? Oh, what will be happening to the Bears? You're kneeling down, you're thinking about sports in your head. What did you just do? You contaminated your head with something unholy before the holy presence of God. Why? Because you never really sense the presence of God. Because when you are in the presence of God, you forget everything and you worship. Let me drive this home. So let's say, this is assuming that the Bulls won, okay? They already lost. They won without, who's our, Derrick Rose. We won. We were into the championship. So we're the dark horse. We're about to win. This is the game where the Bulls will clinch the title. And for some reason, obscure reason, like we have a lottery at work, where we can buy Bulls tickets at a deeply discounted price, the company will pay for it. You have a ticket to the playoff games in the United Center. And you're ready to go and watch the Bulls game at the United Center. And all of a sudden, your mom has a heart attack. Tell me where you will go. If you go to the United Center, there's something wrong with your head. Why will you go to your mom in the hospital and forget the ticket? Can somebody tell me? Yes. Because your mom is more important than the Bulls championship. And that's what you do when you're in the presence of God. When you are truly in the presence of God, you cannot help but worship Him. And the reason why people do not worship Him is they have not sensed the presence of God. So here comes my story.
That is where your priority lies. The underlying principle is priority.
Yes. Why will you go to the hospital in that scenario? Because your mom had a heart attack. Why, Larry? Why not go to the Bulls game? Yes, your answer is because your mom is priority over the Bulls. And what does it mean to make God a priority? Is there anything wrong in playing tennis? There's nothing wrong in playing tennis. There's nothing wrong going to the gym for a workout. But if your gym workout and your tennis game comes into conflict with the worship gathering, and you prefer the tennis game over the worship gathering, will there be something wrong? Yes, that's what Haggai is trying to say. You can conceal it. Oh, I can worship this coming weekend. Who cares about the gathering? If we have a Bible study, who cares about the Bible study? You know, have a game of tennis. I told you about my friend, right, in New Jersey, who shared the conversion story with me. He said he was an executive for Merrill Lynch. So he started this outings of all the executives. They said, hey, let's have a Saturday golf game every weekend. So he organized this. Everybody goes out Saturday morning, plays golf among the executives. Here comes Pastor Bartolome, gives Bible studies to this guy, and they study about the Sabbath. And then Pastor Bartolome was getting his decision so he can be baptized. And the guy said, can I be? I started this Saturday golf game, and now I cannot go to the Saturday golf game. No, it cannot be. No hard feelings, Pastor. Just can. No can do. Let's have lunch and peaceably separate ways. That's it. Don't study the Bible anymore. There was this one literature evangelist who was very persistent, who kept on giving the Bible study, even after the Bible study ended. To the chagrin of this guy, he finally got so mad with this very annoying colporteur. I will embarrass this colporteur in front of my wife, in front of my visitors. So he goes in there and asks the stupidest questions you can think of to embarrass the colporteur. And one day, he thought he's going to ask the question. He said, you know what? You talking about that baptism thing? Next time you study baptism with me, I'll be the first one to be baptized. Where did that come from? You know? He goes to the washroom. He's a big guy. You know, like a little bigger than boy. Boy is still a little big. He cried like a baby for 30 minutes in the washroom. Following day goes to Pastor Bartolome and say, Pastor, you baptized me this coming weekend. Okay, so they go on Saturday. They went in there. It was in the dead of winter, and the water heater wasn't working. So they filled that baptistry with freezing water in the middle of winter. Pastor Bartolome said, we can do this. You might get sick. It's called, are you chickening out, Pastor? So both of them went down there, and he got baptized. Both of them were blue and black and blue coming out. But he was baptized. And he tells me, being every time I go to church and I see somebody getting baptized, I secretly sit in front and I'll bow my head so that people will not see him shedding tears. It's a big boy like me, he's not supposed to cry. But he does that all the time. Where did that come from? I'll be the first one to be baptized, in fact, with the intent of what? Embarrassing the guy who's giving you Bible study. It came from God. And when God gets a hold of you, I don't know what you can do, man. He gets a hold of you. He gets a hold of you. So, yes, there. Oh, yeah, no, you're going to bring that up again?
No.
Sure. Well, some people, you can call it irresistible grace, but some people can't resist grace. I know people who has been given grace. You're called, but that's why it's called grace. And grace is not, grace is not forcibly given. Okay, it's not. So, here's my story, and so we can end this up while we hear the bass play here. Are you playing for us?
No.
Okay, all right. He's not yet teaching. When he teaches, he will attend the session. He will come out with all the outlines. You can also sing, okay? Sing song. Okay, here's the story. So this one lady, I told you, was one of the premier exporters and importers in the Philippines. He is a supplier of Shoemart. You know who Shoemart is, right? There's a running joke in the Philippines. Again, hey, I see how good you are in English. Can you use paramecium in a sentence. Paramecium. Benji is smiling because paramecium is in microbiology. So he goes, oh, it's easy, it's easy. Pare. Look for Henry C. Parameciumart din dito. Parameciumart. Anyways, I had to throw that in. Anyways, Henry C. is the wealthiest Filipino. He's probably richer than even some Americans. You can see the stuff. I read this history. The supplier of Schumart when it comes to apparel, clothing apparel, was this lady. Her name was Ivy. She is a supplier of Walmart. She's a supplier of Kmart. And she's even a supplier of European stores. No, import-export. She goes back and forth to the United States at will, first class. Sends all 5 children to study here. Sends the husband here too. Just goes back to the Philippines. The way this happens is she has several factories in the Philippines. Run by machineries, they produce clothing apparel, and she subcontracts to other factories. And they distribute it to Europe, to America, into the Philippines. So when Fidel Ramos became president of the Philippines, he called on all the businessmen in the country. And President Ramos said, I will be backing you up as your president. And they were very happy. And she said, unfortunately, President Ramos was not true to his promise because every day there was a 10-hour brownout. That's a regular brownout. Sometimes there's more, right? If you're in the Philippines then, I don't know if you were in the Philippines for the 10-hour brownout. There's a problem. When you got a 10-hour brownout and your factory is run by machines, you need the power to run the machines to produce those clothing apparel. Of course, the factory shut down. Well, we got to do something about this, so they started buying generators, and they start running the machines and generators. There were no generators strong enough to handle the workload of the factories. And you know what happened? Generators shut down. All of a sudden, the import-export business of this lady went down the drain because she couldn't produce all the apparel she needed to export. Long story short, she had the biggest credit from Prudential Bank in the Philippines. They honored her money. She can sign a check for $200,000 and she's going to be given that money. But because of what happened, over 150 checks bounced one day. And those checks are for 200 grand, 100 grand. She had no money to produce. Long story short, she lost everything. She left the country, went to California. The first thing that happened to her when she went to California was she was in a very terrible car accident. You know what happened in the car accident? It was so terrible, she almost died. They had to bore a hole in her trachea so she can breathe. So when she was giving this testimony last Saturday afternoon, she could hardly speak because the hole healed, but there was still a hole there in the trachea. And she said this, you know what? God humbled me. Used to be, when I was a boss in the Philippines, I led in the rosary every day. 150 factory workers. I get the rosary and I lead out in the Hail Mary and the Our Father. And all my factory workers saying it out loud. I thought I was very humble and religious, but I was only humble for myself. And I finally learned how to be humble before God. You know what happened to her? He said, I cannot just sit here at home depending on my husband and my kids because they're professionals now. I got to do something because I'm a business person. So she started a Filipino store. She's a businesswoman, enterpriser. Started selling longganisa, chicharong baboy. That's Filipino food. But there was a literature evangelist who knocked at their door. An Adventist literature evangelist, a colporteur. And she was nice. She decided to hire her. And when she started working for her, she goes, "Wag na ito. Wag ka na magtindang longganisa tsaka chicharong baboy. That's not good for your health." They started throwing people. They became very selective. And you know what? At sunset, you close the window, you close the store because it's Sabbath now. They study the Bible in the corner. They sing songs from the hymnal. And then all of a sudden, She starts closing the windows and throwing all these things away. Talks to the husband, who's not a Christian. Said, honey, I got to go someplace. This is a business meeting. Saturday morning. You know where the business meeting is, right? It's the Lord's business. So months passed by, and her husband said, what in the world is this business meeting all about? You've been going every week. Have you ever come to a final decision on what you're trying to do? And then he said, finally, it didn't work out. She had to close down the store. You know what she's doing now? She was a teacher before she became a businesswoman. So she went and taught in one of the schools, the pre-K schools in Los Angeles. And you know, if you've been to pre-K, you know, those kids have like makeshift beds where they can lie down, you know. What she does is get those and puts them back in the closet. She goes, I was a boss supplying internationally. Now I'm fixing these things, moving them back to the closet. That's what I do. I'm like a janitor. And you get, the Lord humbled me. And I'm just thankful that I'm alive. And it took me to have this experience to understand the presence of God. And you know, I had to go to her. I almost hugged her. Because this is the way she ended. She said, I got 5 kids. They don't know the Lord yet. My husband is yet to be an Adventist Christian. And I know in my heart of hearts, I cannot change my kids and I cannot change my husband. Only God can convert them. So my prayer every day, she brings out a devotional book. It is my prayer every day that the converting power of God be on my family. I went to her after the testimony. I said, Ivy, thank you so much. I've been teaching that for a long time, but it has never been put in so eloquent words as you did. I'll begin praying that prayer. The prayer is, when something goes wrong, is not to prove that you're right and the other person is wrong. The prayer is, Lord, may your transforming and converting power be upon us right now, because only God can move. That's the message of Haggai. God is saying, you cannot change yourself. I alone can change you. But you know what? I will change you if you will allow me to change you. And what do? You make me first. Look for my presence, and I will enable you to truly worship me in my temple. And you will understand that. I thought that was cool. And I thought that's the lesson I think we should leave our classes this coming Sabbath. Haggai is not about showing the whole world that you got the grandest temple or the grandest church. Haggai is showing the whole world that you have the presence of God in your congregation. And that you as a congregation worship God before His throne. How does Wintley Phipps say it with his booming voice as he preaches? You know Wintley Phipps, right? Oh, you hear Adventists say, we are the first, we are the heads and not the tail. When it comes to health reform and vegetarianism and health lifestyle, we are the first. When it comes to medical institutions, we are the first. And he starts narrating the first of the Adventists. And then eventually say, how I wish one of these days we will be the first in the world to say that we are the habitation of God's praise. Can't forget those words. It's not Loma Linda. It's not Andrews University. It's not Hinsdale.
Aside from that, we study the 10th, Haggai the 10th now, from all the previous minor prophets, aside from Jonah. Haggai's message was responded positively. Are we going the same thing? Because Haggai's prophecy has a promise. Are we going to be doing the same thing?
I think
we are like what you say. We are the head. We are chosen. We are everything. Are we responding because of the promise?
I think I know your question. I don't think, pardon me, I may be wrong in this, but I don't think the calling of God to us as a people today is not to be the head. The calling of God to us as a people is to humble ourselves before Him and worship Him. If He wants us to be the head, let Him do that. But do not pursue headship. Pursue worship. Did you get me? That's the problem. And then you complain, look, we're not the head, we're kulelats. Why are we kulelats? Because we did not make God first. Because we didn't follow the counsel. We thought we could do it in our own efforts. And because if we are the head, who gets the praise most of the time? We do, not God. But if we learn to humble ourselves and realize that everything is only through God's grace, then you will understand that all the glory belongs to Him. The reason why I say that is, true enough, that's a very good observation. When they were asked to build the temple, how did the people respond? They responded positively and they followed God. Question, will everybody follow? In the end, today, will everybody follow? I've already said this. Very soon, there will be a bill that will be passed in the House of Illinois to approve same-sex marriage. Right? It has been passed to over 10 states where same-sex couples can get married and have the same privileges and benefits that ordinary couples, I'm sorry, not ordinary, normal couples, male and female, can get. And I'm still praying that there'll be enough evangelical leaders in Chicago to block that passage. Because Billy Graham was saying, quoted in the 1970s, Billy Graham said, if God does not punish America, He needs to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. Well, there was a difference, Benji. Could Sodom and Gomorrah have been saved? Oh, don't forget the story. Don't forget the story.
There were 10 righteous. They would have been saved.
There you go. So they could have been saved if there were 10 righteous. You know, it started at 50, right? And
There was count.
And Abraham bargained and bargained. I really like this. Max Lucado did the commentary. Could Abraham had bargained for 2? And could God have said yes?
Maybe.
Oh, he doesn't say maybe. The grace of God will say even yes to 1.
But why did he stop at 10?
That was the problem of Abraham. He stopped. He limited the grace of God to 10. That was his point. Now, we cannot speculate whatever happened. The only problem is, the reason why Sodom and Gomorrah was punished exactly was because of its sins. But if there was enough righteous in the city, it could have been preserved. Why is God not punishing America? Because there's enough righteous in America to preserve this country. Yeah, well,
New York.
okay. That's nothing. No, when you talk about tornadoes, that's nothing compared to Sodom and Gomorrah. If you read Sodom and Gomorrah, what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? You know, I dealt a study on hellfire and the immortality of the soul, and I quoted Jude and 1 Peter and compared it to the Old Testament. You know what Abraham did the following day? He was standing where he could see Sodom and Gomorrah in the plains. He was seeing the smoke of Sodom and Gomorrah ascend into the heavens. That's where you get the imagery in Revelation. What does it go? And the smoke of their torment ascended forever and ever, right? In Revelation 14. Where does it get it? According to 1 Peter and Jude, Sodom and Gomorrah is an example of hell in the last days. That is hell. Sulfur and brimstone. Nothing like a tornado can do. A tornado can still leave some ravages. Sodom and Gomorrah were turned into ashes. Wiped out. And that's what's going to happen. Even death will be burned up in the end. So all I'm trying to say is, if God punishes you, nobody can escape. We talked about that in Zephaniah this morning. When the day of the Lord comes, who shall escape? Who alone can escape? We also talked about that this morning. Only those who belong to Him. And in Revelation, the language they use here is those who are sealed. Why are they called sealed? What was the use of the seal? The seal was a stamp of ownership. So that when the tempest and the day of the Lord comes and the judgment comes, only those who are not sealed by God, who are not owned by God, will suffer from the punishment. How does Psalm 91 say it? 1,000 shall fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but they will not come nigh thee. They will not come near you because you belong to God. So the question is, how do you belong to God? Did you hear what the pastor said this morning in Hebrews? Stop drinking milk. Start growing in Him. They say that a great percentage of Americans today claim that they're born again Christians. Okay? But a great percentage of those who claim that they're born again Christians, they don't care to pray or study the Bible or go to church. Do you believe them that they are Christians? All right. Well, okay. Let's change the illustration. You tell the world, I am married to this woman. And while you're doing the interview, you're interviewing with your concubine. When I say concubine, you're your mistress right there. Right there in the apartment of your mistress. Somebody interviews you and tell you, hey, really, I'm married to that woman and I'm a faithful husband to her. Will people believe you?
They will if you are
If they do not know your mistress, they will believe you. But if they do,
with faith in Utah.
yeah, right. If you're whatchamacallit, if you believe in polygamy, okay, all right, right. But if you're saying that the context is not, that's not legal in America. You got to understand it. If you can say you're Mormon, that's not legal in America. They will still arrest you for polygamy today. They will not arrest you for homosexuality, which they did in the 1960s. In fact, they will even protect you for homosexuality today. That's how weird their culture is, okay? That's not my point. The point is, if you're having an interview in the context of American culture and you're saying, I am really married to a wife, I am a married man, okay? And you are interviewing with your mistress right behind you, will people believe you? That's how crazy it is to say, I am a born Christian and I believe God with all the idols right by me. Okay, but I don't want to be as literal as that. Is it possible for you to mimic your allegiance to God and yet you got other priorities than Him?
That is Christian atheist.
Yeah, the term there is functional atheism. You may not be atheist by profession, but you're functionally an atheist. What is functional atheist? Functionally, the way you function, you have another God or another priority greater than God. And that's what it's saying.
You don't believe in any deity. No God.
No,
No God.
that's not really true.
That is
Who is the God of the atheists? No, their God is in themselves. That's their God. That's why it's still a religion. The only difference is the God is you. I won't admit that. And what did C.S. Lewis said? If there were no God, there will be no atheist. Did you get that? Let me repeat what he said. There were no God, there will be no atheist. Isn't it true? Even if there were no God, there will be no atheist.
Buddhism.
No. Ponder that first. Try explain.
Buddhism has the word for God.
Yeah,
There are no
no. Try understand. No, that's not what C.S. Lewis is trying to say. He's not talking about Buddhism. There can be no belief that there is no God if there is no God. Do you get it? That's what he's trying to say. The reason why, it's basically saying, atheism is an argument for theism. The fact that there's atheism proves that there is a God to deny. You deny it, but He's there. But we don't want to go there, okay? All I'm trying to say is, you can try to deny God, but God is real. You know, one of these days, He's going to make a visitation in your life, and I don't care how proud you are, you will be driven to your knees and understand Him. And what did C.S. Lewis say? In the end, there will only be two things that will matter. People who will tell God, thy will be done, and God telling people, your will be done. Did you get it? And seek ye the Lord while He may be found, says the prophets. While you can still build my presence before you, and you can repent before me, come to me. Because when the judgment comes, you will be preserved. And I'm telling you, when the glory of the temple is restored, you will be part of that glory because you will worship in my presence. That's what Haggai is trying to say. I am so glad for the testimony last Sabbath afternoon. This very rich woman doesn't care about money anymore. And she said, if in fact it took that experience for me to understand the greatest treasure in Jesus Christ, it was worth that experience. Can you imagine being a multi-millionaire? I'm talking in dollars in the Philippines. Going into a point where you just nag-iimis ka lang nung gawa nung pre-K. You're like a janitor. And then thanking God because that happened to you. The world will tell you you're crazy. But Haggai is saying, you don't understand. If you have God, you have everything. If you don't have God, you have nothing. That's what Haggai is trying to say. And that is true worship. We come into a very, very gripping story again this coming weekend. When you share this with your class, don't exhaust the outline. You have 3 Sabbaths to talk about the outline. But just give them I think this is good. You just go here so they'll have a historical background and go to the messages of Haggai. We go to Zechariah next. What is the most famous text in Zechariah? Just to give you a preview. Zechariah 4:6. How does it go? Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, said the Lord of hosts. So we will look at another perspective where a prophet motivated the people of God in restoring the temple in the ministry of Zechariah next week. Suffice it to note that Haggai says there's 3 sermons that appeals to your performance so you can pursue God, that appeals to your patience because one of these days, I got to put this in. Our family still goes through a very difficult time. I hope you remember us in prayer. Sometimes my wife and I don't even see each other because my wife will have to take care of my sister-in-law, who's literally skin and bones now because of the ravages of cancer. I don't have to go through all the details. It's the most delightful and yet the most challenging thing that can happen to you. Boyette knows that because Jennifer Jingle takes care of Via every day. If my wife goes there, she looks for her. Haggai says, be patient. One of these days you will see glory, where death and cancer will be gone. Okay? That's why this lesson is especially relevant to us when we talk about that. And then ponder. You cannot make it through preparing for Jesus to come in your own strength. What you need to do is pray for the transforming and converting power of God to be upon your heart and upon your family. If you have problems with your family, you want your kids, you want your spouses, you want your loved ones to accept Jesus Christ, don't think you can do it by doctrinal study alone. It's important to study the Bible. But truly, they will only be converted to the power of God. And if you partner with God and kneel down on, bend your knees to Him and tell Him, Lord, give your transforming power. In fact, my prayer every day now for my kids, I say, Lord, get them in touch with somebody at their level who can lead them to Jesus Christ or closer communion with Jesus Christ. Something which I might not do because of the age gap between me and them. Please be kind enough to have a mentor, know them, and guide them to the Lord because you alone can transform their lives. And maybe if we learn to pray like that in church, things will happen, before you know it. And miracles will happen left and right. And our measure of success is not how much money you make, but how intimate we are in our relationship with God and how much we worship Him. Then it will truly make a difference. All right, let's bow our heads for prayer. Heavenly Father, thank Thee for this wonderful lesson in Haggai. Hits home, really close to home. Question of our priorities while we enjoy the luxuries of this Western culture in the United States compared to where we were in the Philippines. It's so easy to forget You and to think that we, in our own power, have generated what we have today. Teach us not to live in our paneled houses while Your presence crumble before us. Teach us to pursue You with all our might and make You our first priority. And find delight and pleasure not in our achievements, but only in seeing Your name glorified first in our families, in our hearts, in our church, and before the whole world. When we start another week, may that empowerment be upon each one of us. Your converting and transforming power be upon each one of us in our own hearts, that You can make a difference through us to the lives of those people who are living with us at home, in church, and even in the workplace. Be with us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.